Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Around the Coin with your host, Stephen Sargeant. Today we have Sunny Aggarwal, who's the co founder of Osmosis Labs. We talk about his early days working in the Cosmos ecosystem and how he built out this DEX that is actually transacting over $28 billion worth of volume on the Osmosis Labs and Cosmos ecosystem. We talk about app chains, side chains, blockchains, both layer one and layer two. I think they even throw in a couple questions about two chains. That's how great this conversation was. And we even talk about the recent discussion around mesh security and how this plays out to real world examples like NATO. This is a must listen to technical episode where we go deep into Cosmos and what they're doing at Osmosis Labs. Stay tuned and reach out to me if you have any questions or you absolutely love these episodes and want to leave an amazing review. Welcome to another edition of the Around the Coin podcast. Your host, Stephen Sargeant, here with Sunny from Osmosis Labs. Sunny, tell us a little bit about who you are, and then we'll jump right into your background and what you're building there in the decentralized space.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really excited. Hey, everyone. My name is Sunny Aggarwal. I am the co-founder of a project called Osmosis. But yeah, some of my background, I've been in I've been working full-time in crypto since 2017. I've been involved with the space since 2015. Originally was just as a student, just at Berkeley. I was like getting interested in Bitcoin. I helped teach a course there at Berkeley. That's kind of how for me, the best way to learn anything is to teach it, which is, I assume for you, why you do a podcast as well, because it's like just like such a good learning opportunity, right? And so learned a lot of crypto by teaching that course. Then kind of went full time into crypto 2017. I dropped out of college to, I found I was just like learning way more by I was interning over the summer, originally at ConsenSys. Then I thought the Ethereum stuff was cool, but I was like, oh, what is this? It wasn't what I was looking for. So I kind of like switched to working on Cosmos halfway through the summer, and I just loved it and dropped out of school, and I've been working on Cosmos since. It's been like 6.5, almost 7 years now at this point.
What were your plans when you went to school? You studied to become an electrical engineer. It looks like computer science, which it makes sense why you got into the blockchain. But what kind of were your plans when you're like, hey, I'm going to school? You weren't like, hey, let me jump into Ethereum full time, and this is why I'm going to Berkeley. Tell us about like your thought process at that time. What did you think you were going to become, and what did you envision your life being at that point?
Yeah, I was originally, my plan was to go into like robotics. I was like, in high school, I loved robotics. And that's kind of why I was doing like electrical engineering and computer science. I see you have some cool circuits behind your head over there. But yeah, so I really loved like that kind of stuff. And so, but making plans, life hits you. I'm also just, and so when at Berkeley, my major was like the electrical engineering and computer science, but I was doing a minor in political economy just because I love like economics and history and politics and stuff like that. And so basically freshman year, I learned about Bitcoin, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is the perfect combination of my two interests, right? I'm literally using computer science to do like political economic change. And yeah, so as soon as I learned about it, then, my whole life trajectory just changed, I guess.
And how did you learn about Bitcoin? Was it the ecosystem there? A lot of people, studying different things and into,
Mhm.
the DJ forums back at that time, the Bitcoin forums. How did you first learn about it?
So the first time I ever heard about Bitcoin was this was like when I was still in high school. So one of my friends, or maybe I overheard something. I forgot what it was, but I heard the sentence, "Dogecoin just sponsored the Jamaican bobsled team," and I was like, "What does that even mean?" That sentence, I don't even know what any of those things mean. And so I go home that evening, I look up Dogecoin, and I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I look up, obviously, talks about Bitcoin, and so I look up Bitcoin, and I'm like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And so that was like the initial seed of what I learned about Bitcoin. Then, fast forward, 6 months later, I'm in college. There's a small Bitcoin club there. Like I'm talking like
Really?
6 guys, basically. It was just like, we would just hang out, get dinner, and talk about Bitcoin. And I just, as a freshman in college, you join all these different clubs, you're trying to find your people, And so I joined a lot of different clubs, joined to robotics clubs, and the Bitcoin one, despite it being so small, I just felt like the guys who I met there were like so smart. And I was like, they were just talking about stuff that was just like way over my head. And I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but you sound really smart. And I think I'm just going to keep hanging out with you. And hopefully I'll get smarter through the process.
I feel like
And so,
that's
yeah.
like what's stalking like anyone that's deep into the space is they're just level of thought process. It's funny that you make that statement. I think if there wasn't for the movie Cool Runnings, the Jamaicans having a bobsled team would probably have been the thing that you went home and started Googling versus Dogecoin, I think at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Cool Runnings is a great movie. But yeah, so yeah, that's how that happened. So that's how I learned about Bitcoin. And then, yeah, the club. So basically what happened then was, like I said, there's 6 guys in this club. We were like, eventually we were like, okay, why is this thing not like bigger? Like, why is no one else into this thing? There's like so much exciting stuff happening. Or at the time, it was also like bottom of the bear market as well. So it wasn't this is like the 2015 bear market basically.
Oh,
And so, but we're like, oh, you know what? Maybe because no one understands this. So me and 2 other guys, we started this course. So Berkeley has this really nice program where like students can teach classes as long as you get a professor to back you. And so that's why 3 of us, we started a course, and the first semester we had 60 people join the course, and we kind of, that old Bitcoin club kind of ended up dying almost. And we started a new club called Blockchain at Berkeley. And that's like a huge, I think it's one of the largest like student clubs. It's still running today. And one of the things I'm proud of is, I think there was a period of time for, I'd say, 2 years, let's say from like 2016 to 2018, where the best way to learn crypto was our course. I think nowadays it's like, if you want to learn crypto, there's so many educational resources for you to go look up. But I think there was like a good 2-year period where anyone's like, how do I like 0 to 75 on crypto, right? And I was like, I think the course, and then all those YouTube video lectures and stuff are still on YouTube. I still sometimes like direct people there.
that's awesome. We'll make sure to include that in the link. And it's funny, like going through a lot of the interview prep that I do see that Berkeley, Berkeley comes up in a lot of those conversations. So I think you're right. Yeah, that 2016 and 2018 period, there wasn't a lot of, I'd say institutional level, training, right? There's a lot of, hey, grifters and other people in the space saying, giving you the basics, but there was never anything attached, I think, to a university. So then you go and intern at one of probably the most notable companies in the world, ConsenSys, the creators of MetaMask and Fura, mid-May. Tell me about that experience. Was that like, hey, you're just kind of getting copies, or was that like, hey, you're sitting down beside some of the brightest minds that are launching, projects alongside Ethereum?
Yeah, no, it was really good. So like ConsenSys at the time, it used this thing called the spoke model, where it basically has a bunch of like mini companies or projects within ConsenSys. And so the project that I was working on was called Alethio. I don't know if it's still running or not, but basically it was like the proto version of the graph. So we were taking like Ethereum data, putting it into a graph database and making it easy for people to run queries on top of. So good idea, probably just a bit too early at the time, right idea, wrong timing. But yeah, so I was working on that. And so I think 2 things, like I enjoyed it. I think I learned a lot about Ethereum. It was nice because I basically had, part of what I was doing was like going through the Ethereum yellow paper and like taking all the concepts and turning it into like data schemas, which was like really nice. So I learned a lot about how the EVM and how Ethereum works. But then for me, I think the 2 things were like, one, I think a lot of ConsenSys was very focused at the application level at the time. I wanted to work on more lower level stuff. I got really interested in proof of stake. Like I got the proof of stake bug, and I was like, I spent all my time reading all the proof of stake white papers and everything. And ConsenSys just wasn't really involved with that at the time. So I was like, I want to go figure out how to work on proof of stake. So that's kind of how I reached out to the Tendermint team. Because out of all the proof of stake white papers I read, the Tendermint one was like, oh, this is like the simplest and like makes the most sense to me. So that's why I reached out to them. But the other thing was honestly, like, I'm a little bit of a Bitcoin maxi. And so at the time le- I joined ConsenSys because I was interested in learning more about Ethereum, because I had followed it a little bit, but I wanted to like, okay, well, I want to understand this thing. So I got a lot of understanding of it, but then for me, in the back of my head, it was like, all this stuff is so cool, but like, what is this ETH shitcoin? I thought we are building for Bitcoin. And so that's kind of why I got really interested in Cosmos as well, was like, I'm like, oh, this is how we build the app layer for Bitcoin. It's
Interesting.
Bitcoin isn't, Cosmos is all about app chains, like application specific chains. And Bitcoin is the original app chain. It's the money app chain. And the idea for Bitcoin was always that we're going to grow the ecosystem via side chains, right? This was Blockstream's idea. They coined the term side chain, but then never really shipped anything. They never delivered. And at the time, I'm like, okay, Cosmos is how we build the app layer for Bitcoin. We're going to have every app will be on its own blockchain, but Bitcoin, the asset, will flow and be the money of every chain. And so, that's the vision I had 7 years ago when I started working on it. And I feel it's just now in the last like few months, really actually finally starting to take shape.
And can you talk to me about, Bitcoin obviously has BTC and its actual native token, but Cosmos has Atom. How does that relate? If you're kind of using Bitcoin as the ultimate money stream, why, just for the viewers, why does Cosmos have its own cryptocurrency? And maybe
Mhm.
that will be helpful to understand the Cosmos ecosystem and how it differs from Bitcoin
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Ethereum.
So one thing actually, so that's actually I guess a common misconception is Atom is not the token of Cosmos. It is a token of a specific chain called the Cosmos Hub. The Cosmos Hub is just, unfortunately, it's like a naming. It's a little bit of confusing naming, but it's unlike, most ecosystems where like, to use Ethereum, you need to use ETH, or to use Solana, you need to use Sol, right? It's Cosmos is not about that. Like Cosmos is all about self sovereignty. You can, so someone like DYDX, like they're built as a Cosmos chain, basically have almost nothing to do with Atom, right? There's Osmosis. And so what is Atom, right? I think Atom serves a couple of purposes, right? Well, they're really focused right now on shared security. So all of these Cosmos chains, they all have their own staking tokens right now, but some of them are just not very high value, right? Some of these tokens market caps are like, less than 20 million, let's say. And that's not, in a proof of stake system, you want to have high economic security. And Atom is just a token that happens to have a multi-billion-dollar market cap. And what they can do with that is they can lend out security. So honestly, like a lot of the stuff you see in Eigenlayer today was ideas that originated from Cosmos, of this idea of restaking and shared security and stuff like that. So
That's
that's the
so
purpose of Atom. So it's an opt-in thing. That's the big, you know, Polkadot and everything. You have to use the dot shared security. Cosmos is all about, you choose whatever security you want to do. If Cosmos Hub will provide you some security if you want it. The Eigenlayer is providing security to Cosmos via Ethos. There will be Bitcoin security on Cosmos via Babylon. So the Cosmos has always been this idea of give developers and builders like all the options and tooling, and they can choose what they want to use.
And is this the biggest feature why developers come build on Cosmos? Because I think, with so many chains out there, so many blockchains, you have so many options, whether it's specific blockchains for gambling, ETH is very vast, but there's so many blockchains popping up now, especially
Yeah.
with the use of
Mhm.
AI and being able to kind of like what you're probably doing as Moses Labs is being able to build those app chains or side chains. Why are people coming to Cosmos versus maybe another chain?
Yeah, I think people are coming to Cosmos when they want to have a lot of control over the functionality of their chain. So what all Cosmos is, right, is at the end of the day, maybe that's a good place to start, right? Is it's a set of tools that make it very easy for you to build your own custom blockchain. That's at the end of the day, that's all it is. Now they have all these other features as well. We have this thing called IBC, which makes it so you can have these blockchains communicate very easily with each other. But at the end of the day, a, it's a toolkit. It's kind of like Linux, right? Linux is just this open source toolkit, and on top of that, you have a networking stack that allows like Linux computers to talk to each other. But like you know, it's Linux, and so why do people want to use the Cosmos SDK to build their own blockchains? Is it it gives you the most control over, if you're trying to build a very simple thing, it's probably easiest to deploy it on an EVM chain or just as a smart contract. But if you're trying to do something like DYDX, where they wanted to have so much control over how the order book works on their chain, they have their validators like run order matching in the mempool, all this kind of stuff. Like you can't do that on any of the other stacks right now. And so, or Thorchain, right? Thorchain wanted their validators to run bridges to Bitcoin and to Ethereum and to all these other chains. Celestia wanted their validators to do all this like data availability sampling and stuff, right? So it's if you want to do something that goes beyond just like a basic smart contract, what you can do in a basic smart contract, that's what. And the thing is, it's like most applications are probably not that. But in my opinion, the most important applications, the biggest applications, are the ones who do need that level of like control.
Are there any other use cases where you can see like an organization building? Like a lot of what you're saying is like infrastructure or
Yeah.
modular blockchains are building on top of Cosmos. Is there like any business use cases, or is this all
hmm
more infrastructure pieces
hmm
regards to more technical blockchain usage?
Yeah. I mean, so a lot of, for example, if there's Fincha, so if you know Line is like the one of the biggest. It's like the WhatsApp of East Asia, basically. So Japan, Korea, all these places, and so they built a Cosmos SDK blockchain because they're trying to, some, or even Binance, like Binance Chain, right? It was built using the Cosmos SDK as well. So it's like a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
these. Even one thing people don't realize is Polygon is actually built using the Polygon POS chain is built using the Cosmos SDK as well. So a lot of the things you might be using already are actually Cosmos under the hood, and that's the beauty of it. You don't it as an open source toolkit. You can say I'm Cosmos, or you don't have to say you're Cosmos. It's up to you, right? It's like a lot of the things are actually Cosmos under the hood, and so uh yeah, so like someone like Line, right? They want to build like their own blockchain ecosystem for payments and all this stuff,
Right.
but they just want to have a little bit more control over it. They want to use their own token for paying fees. Like, on any other chain, you have to use ETH to pay fees or something, right?
Right.
And so that's why they're building their own chain. Or there's, a bunch of like RWA chains being built on Cosmos. Like consortium chains is another like big use case of why you want your own specialized chain.
And it makes a lot of sense. If you want to use your own token, ETH could get expensive with gas fees. People don't want, and it's like not doing exactly what you wanted. So you're
Yeah,
almost overpaying for functionality when you're really not using it to its full potential. You just wanted to use it for one subsector. And it's
exactly.
kind of like open banking,
Mhm.
right? You mentioned open source. It almost feels like open banking, where a lot of times you don't really realize you're using open banking because the bank that you're going to has this open banking application underneath it that, as you
Yeah.
say, you never see, or that's been white labeled. That's really, really interesting. Talk to me about this idea of IBC. Can you explain what IBC is? Because I believe you mentioned it. I think it's integral to what you're building at
Mhm.
Osmosis as well.
Yeah. So basically, in a world of app chains, you don't want everything to just be this isolated island, right? Where, okay, how is money going to get onto this thing? How is capital going to get in, right? Like, how are people going to move between these app chains? And so basically, IBC was, at the end of the day, it's a bridge. It's a fancy way of saying bridge, but it was a very well designed bridge from a security perspective, because most bridges today are like really multi sigs, right? There's like a set of people who are a bit like who are like, okay, in Wormhole or Layer Zero or anything, it's okay. Here's a set of, in Wormhole, I think 29 people, but basically here's a set of people, and they hold funds on one chain and then they like mint it on the other. And so there's some intermediary there. The idea behind IBC was, can we build a bridging solution that removes this intermediary altogether and have, so there's this concept in blockchains called light clients, which is, if you want to know that a transaction happened on a chain, you can just get the block headers and then these Merkle proofs to show that, hey, this is what happened on this chain. And it's a way of getting proofs that something happened without having to run a full node.
And in
And
this
so,
instance, you could say that's how a lot of these apps on your phone are being used, right? It doesn't need
ex-
to download the whole blockchain, but it's showing you that
yeah,
you have this certain balance based on the transaction headers that it can read.
exactly. And so what IBC was, hey, this like light client protocol that you usually have on your phone or something, what if we put that into a smart contract? And so basically, let's say you have two chains, right? Let's say Osmosis and DYDX, and you want to send token from USDC from DYDX to Osmosis. What will happen is you make a transaction on DYDX saying, "Hey, I'm depositing blocking my USDC here," and then instead of a like multi-sig that's like watching that and then attesting to it on Osmosis, the Osmosis chain in a smart contract has a light client and you can prove to the Osmosis chain that, hey, I really did lock my USDC on DYDX, and then it will give you the USDC on Osmosis. So you remove
Right.
all the intermediaries. And so for us, our take is that eventually we need to have all bridging be fully trustless and permissionless. No intermediaries. And that's kind of was the purpose of the building IBC.
Does that make bridges what you're implementing there with IBC? Is that more safe and secure? Because we saw in 2023, like in October alone, I think Chainalysis reported, $700 million worth of hacks that were on DeFi. Most of them had to do with hacks on like things like the Ronin bridge. Does what you're
Yeah.
building help the security of that because they can do that attestation automatically? They don't have to almost send the tokens in order, and that's
Yeah.
where, criminals are kind of attacking is these bridge protocols.
Yeah. So there's basically there's two types of hacks or that have happened, right? There's one that are smart like code bugs, and then there's that are like centralization bugs, right? Attacks, right? So some of the wormholes hack that happened 2 years ago, that was a code bug, right? And there was a bug in the code that was exploited. Another thing is IBC is also just code. We're not going to say that IBC is never going to have a bug or get something, right? But it, I think there's a lot of people using it. There's a lot of eyes on it. It stood the test of time. It's been running for years, right? Now, the thing when centralization bugs, the thing like the Ronin one or the Axie one or the what was that other chain? There was the one where like the farming DEX thing, whatever. There have been a number of bridge hacks where it's like, oh, the multi-sig of that bridge that it says it's 8 people, but it turned out that one person had access to 4 of them, and that's the thing that IBC is meant to solve, where it's like, hey, like a lot of these bridges are just like smoke and mirrors, like how decentralized they are. That's what IBC is. Okay, get rid of these intermediaries there, and yeah,
Which make a lot of sense because I believe in the Ronin hack. They didn't find out about it, like $600 million. They didn't know about it until a week later. Whereas you're saying because of the eyes, because of the activity, because of the decentralized nature, someone would have seen that transaction happen almost instantaneously.
yeah, exactly. So I think like actually, IBC is probably the most used bridge in all of crypto because I mean, let's see, I'm gonna check. I think right now we're at the total volume is 24 hours was like no, that can't be right. Okay, I'll have to check what the right number is. Oh, about 8 9 about $90 million bridged in 24 hours, which I think is like probably higher than any other bridge.
That's interesting. Now, tell me about you talked a little bit about Osmosis Labs. Tell me about the relationship between Osmosis Labs and Cosmos and that ecosystem. And then
Mhm.
specifically, what is Osmosis Labs doing and why are people using it?
Yeah. So Osmosis. So, I was part of, like I mentioned, I was part of the original core dev team of Cosmos, built a lot of that tooling and helped build the Cosmos SDK, helped build IBC. And then after a while, it was like, all right, we built all this tooling. Now I want to, like I told you, I left ConsenSys because I wanted to go build like infrastructure stuff. But then after I spent years doing that, I say, all right, I want to go start building like, all right, now the infrastructure is at a point that I'm happy with. Now it's time to go start building apps again. And that's kind of why we started Osmosis in order to build. We're like, okay, what are the things we want to do? What does a new ecosystem need? Obviously, it needs a DEX. Really, our passion was we were trying to figure, we took like a bunch of winding routes until we figured out that we want to build a DEX. We kind of originally wanted to start with like privacy stuff, like building private payment and all this kind of stuff. But then we were like, thought about it. We're like, okay, what is the things that privacy is like not a product in and of itself. It's a feature.
Right.
People don't
Mhm.
come to something for privacy. It's an add-on bonus. And so we're like,
And I
okay, we
think
have
even
this.
when they think they're coming to something because of privacy, they end up seeing that the functionality might not be 100%, and they end up giving up some of that privacy for
Yes.
user experience anyway.
Yeah.
So we see things like Ironfish, same thing, privacy blockchain. But if you want to do certain functions, they'll reduce that amount of privacy for functionality. So you end up being probably right where you end up right now. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, I remember that I was looking through the Ironfish stocks and they were like, "Oh," I was like, "Wow, you figured out how to do this thing that Zcash can't? How do you do that?" It's because they reduced the amount of privacy that you get in order to do those functionalities. But so yeah, so we were like, "All right, well, we need to build something that has users and people come for, and then we'll build privacy functionality into it." And that's kind of why we started. We're like, looked on crypto. We're like, okay, exchanges seem to be the thing that like has product market fit in crypto, right? So let's build an exchange, let's build a DEX, and then we'll use that as a platform to build all of our privacy vision, we have a lot of like takes. And so Osmosis is our platform to deliver our crypto takes.
And a couple things. Was there not already a decentralized exchange platform on the Cosmos in the Cosmos ecosystem?
There were a couple, just none of them really nailed it, I guess. I think Osmosis came and kind of just got a lot of product market fit. We were it was well timed as well because we launched like just a few months after IBC went live. So what happened was you had Cosmos SDK was live, and then it took a year for IBC to come live as well. And so we launched at a really good time. Part of like what happened was Cosmos has a lot of assets that are like very high value. Even if you look today in like look at the top 200 assets by market cap, Cosmos probably has the second most after EVM ecosystem, like probably more than Solana. But the problem is that like at the time, it was very hard for centralized exchanges to list them because it's not as easy as adding an ERC20. You have to run.
Right.
And so there was like a lot. So you have, a lot of pent up demand for liquidity on a lot of these Cosmos assets, but it wasn't being addressed. And so with Osmosis via IBC, bridging to Osmosis DEX, we don't have to run a full node or anything. We're just running a light client as a smart contract. And so that's the other thing that like makes like Osmosis's bridging or IBC very nice is it's permissionless where in a bridge wormhole or Axelar or something, right? You have to go ask their team, hey, please add my chain to it. With with IBC, you don't have to ask anyone. The way to set up a bridge, let's say you launched new chain today, right? Stephen chain, okay? And you have your own token, Steph, and you want to have it on Osmosis. You don't have to ask us to run a bridge. The way you set up an IBC connection is you make a transaction on Osmosis, you make a transaction on your chain, and now the bridge exists because you're just deploying the smart contract for running the light client.
Very similar to the actual Lightning Network, right? Where you open up that channel, and once that channel is open, you can kind of now transact back and forth without there being a huge burden. Most of the work is done in the first two transactions, and everything else runs freely. That's really, really interesting. And now you're part of the core team at Cosmos. Is this something that they encourage? They want, the builders to go build more things on top of it? Or are they like, hey, we kind of need you doing the core stuff here? How does that work when you're kind of building out from the main ecosystem?
Yeah. So, okay. So sorry, I forgot a key event in this story. So that core team at Cosmos, the company was called All In Bits, AIB for short. But what happened was the easiest way to put it is the CEO kind of went a little crazy and he kind of, because of that, everyone, like no one wanted to work at that company anymore. And all the engineers sort of like quit basically. But we all like were so mission driven that we wanted to keep working on Cosmos. And so we all had to figure out different ways of no one's part of this like core team anymore. Some people created new companies to do core development. Some people started creating new companies to do new apps. So, Slushio was built by one of my ex colleagues at AIB. Sabalier was built by an ex colleague. Juno was built by a lot of the Cosmos ecosystem was like developed by the people who used to work at that AIB company.
Right.
So
because the tools are there. It's all open source. They take the tools and now they can build on their own infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of acted like this like big bang event that like seeded, it kind of, in retrospect, it kind of worked well where you had a bunch of people spend 3 years building all these open source tools, then you blow up the company and now everyone leaves to create new companies that use those open source tools to build their own products.
The CEO probably didn't feel that way, but I'm sure the ecosystem really feels like, and I guess, I think, was it Jay Kwan at the time, or am I thinking of two separate scenarios?
No, Jay Kwan,
Yeah, because I think there was a lot of infighting, and actually Adam Token forked, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes. So that happened more recently. So Jay, he like pops up every like now and then, like he'll pop up, start some drama, and then go and go into hiding again for 9 months and then pop up
he's like the
again.
Kanye
Cause
West
some
of crypto, right? Like
yeah.
if he's coming at him, if he's coming out, it's gonna be there's gonna be
Mhm.
fireworks, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing with Jay, like he's brilliant. I think like from a
Yeah.
technical level, his Tendermint ConsenSys was just like a brilliant idea. And I just some of the, I don't think he's necessarily like the best leader of the ecosystem, but I think like
Right.
his technical ideas were part of why we're all here.
Can we talk about that? Not so much about Jay, but hey, you're dealing with a bunch of technical people, but you're
Yeah.
still dealing with people. You can deal with the technology and you're dealing with, the infrastructure and SDKs. But at the end of the day, you're leading communities. How
Yeah.
tricky is that for even you at Osmos Labs? Whereas, hey, I'm dealing with a bunch of developers. As you said, some, are more mission driven like yourself, where you just believe in the mission. How tricky is that to deal with a bunch of technical people that may not have all the social capacities as maybe your regular leaders like the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely been very interesting to see how some, within crypto, like some technical people have just really stepped up to be like, turns out they're like just really good leaders in general. Anatoly from Solana, right? I think he was an engineer, right? And then I think he's just stepped in and has done a really amazing job as just leading the community and stuff. So I don't know. I think there's different people do different things, right? Some of our engineers, they just want to code all day, not be in the limelight or anything, right? But then some people that, they want to actually be able to be more, outward facing. So that for me at AIB, that was me. Like I was like, I liked to be more outward facing. And so I ended up doing a lot of DevRel for Cosmos
Right.
actually. So
Yeah.
I started as an engineer, but I was like, hey, I don't want to like code all the time. I want to go out and give
Talk
talks,
to
like
people. Yeah,
talk to
talk and
people, like
thoughts and
be the evangelist. And so that's kind of how I like kind of my career trajectory, where I started as an engineer, then turned more into DevRel. And I love helping people like onboard onto the stack. And then that kind of gave me more, network with the larger
right.
like community. And then when it came time, when we started Osmosis, I had that like network that I was able to like, into.
Let me ask you this,
So
because I'm in, marketing, content creation. I work with a lot of like
yeah.
crypto and blockchain investigations companies, analytical companies, the chain analysis of the world. What's it like for you as a company now to try and, market yourself? Because are you
Mhm.
marketing to more of the tech savvy people? Are you trying to bring, some people that have a foot in the tech savvy door, but they're still kind of building up huge Web2 infrastructure and helping them bring them open? How are like, because I think a lot of tech people listen to this podcast. How do you approach marketing and business development? Is it just going to be in these hackathons, the ETH Denvers of the world? Are you trying to bring some more of the, with the Bitcoin ETF, trying to bring some more of the traditional actors into the space to build on top of Osmos Labs?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think right now, like we were very focused up till now, we've been very focused on like the Cosmos ecosystem. There was a core community within Cosmos and we were kind of serving that. But our end goal is I want to build the decentralized Coinbase. I think Coinbase has done a really good job at onboarding people into crypto.
Right.
And this is something I think most DEXs just don't do. Today, every bull market, a lot of people get into crypto. They enter via Coinbase and Binance, and less than 5% of it probably make it on chain. And they all get stuck there. And so I think it's important for DEXs to move up the funnel and be people like the way to get into crypto shouldn't be from Coinbase. It should be from a DEX, right? And so that's kind of what we're targeting is like, how do we, we're not really as focused on, oh, we want institutional traders and stuff like that. Like for us, or our vision is more on the like, how do we get retail people to come? And our take is that that's if you can solve that, everything else fits in. Where if the retail traders come, then other traders will
Right.
come in order to the thing is at the end of the day, if retail is kind of like the fish in poker, you have the fish. And so it's, wherever the retail is trading, that's where other traders are going to want to come in, that and then liquidity is going to follow that. And so it's
And they're going to be the ones talking to their institutions, say, hey, why don't you offer this or why aren't you involved? But tell me about the challenges of that. What's the biggest challenge of getting to retail? Do you think, the average user, decentralized exchanges is kind of like you're being your own bank. Do you
yeah.
think the average user is ready to be their own bank? Or do you think they should be dabbling? Should they be fully invested in decentralized exchanges, or should they be in decentralized exchanges and then utilizing those central points when they feel it
Mhm.
necessary, or when they have to, maybe off ramp or cash out?
Yeah, so I think I mean, there's a bunch of so I actually did this just to experiment where this was like 3 or 4 months ago. One of my friends who works at he's a software engineer at Robinhood. So like technical in fintech, in fact, but has never used crypto. And I gave him a challenge and I recorded the entire thing. I told him like, hey, buy one uh buy $100 of maker token on Uniswap. Figure out how to do it. And it took him like over an hour, like of figuring out how do you download what is a wallet? You have to download this MetaMask thing. Oh, what why am I saving these words? It was like so it was a great case study. I had the whole thing and then we documented it and made a nice video out of it. But it's okay, what are the pain points? It's like, okay, one, I think wallets are very hard for people to understand and
Right.
especially saving the words. So we're that's kind of where we've been spending a lot of time right now. We've been working on this concept called smart accounts. It's basically like a way of doing account abstraction, but it's like I want to kill the concept of wallets. Like you should not need to have a wallet. There's a lot of, you can use the secure enclave of your MacBook or your iPhone or your Android phone or whatever. Phones now have so much like like cryptographic material storage systems now. We don't need to have these separate wallets to do that anymore. So
That's interesting.
basically, like when crypto started, we kind of started our own Web3 kind of had its own trajectory of cryptography, but in the meantime, Web 2 has actually also been doing a lot of cryptography innovation, and I feel they haven't been, like, merged yet, and so that's what we've been spending a lot of time looking at, going through all the, W3C standards and be like, "Okay, here's this thing that can actually be, like, very applicable to crypto," and so that way, the onboarding experience feels more like the Web 2 apps people are familiar with. So that's number 1. Fiat on-ramps, that's the other one. That's actually the harder problem. It's that I is h Binance has actually done a good job on this P2P thing that they've done that, but at the end of the day, the fiat on-ramp is the thing that's very hard to decentralize, and I think that's why Coinbase was brilliant with USDC, right? Because my take is everything else that they do is gonna get decentralized, but that owning that fiat on-ramp and off-ramp point, that's where Coinbase will be relevant in the long term.
And I think the reason why that's hard, and that's going to be my next question, is because the lack of, know your customer, anti-money laundering, compliance programs that the DEXs have now, decentralized exchanges. How do you solve for that problem? When people are like, "Hey, I would use you, but I need KYC, I need compliance, I need that check mark from a compliance standard, I need the tax reform that's going to be provided by the Coinbases of the world." How do you kind of
Yeah.
solve for that problem, which seems to be a more everyday problem of the
Yeah.
people that you're trying to onboard?
Yeah, so I mean, we're working on like generating tax reports, for example, like from on our site for you. But the compliance stuff, that's where I think this kind of comes to. You need like some cryptography, like with zero knowledge proofs. You want to be able to say
Yeah.
make a proof that hey, I'm proving XYZ about myself, but like keeping that information private. So, like I mentioned, even you know, our goal is we want to I suppose our goal was like a privacy platform, right? And so, but we've had to, especially like post tornado cash, we've had to rethink a lot about how we design it and architect it so it allows still compliant, maintain levels of compliancy while keeping the privacy without undoing the whole point of the system.
And is there any projects that are built on the Osmosis that you're like, oh, on Osmosis that you're like, oh, these are really cool. More people should know about them, or just even your personal projects that are like, oh, I just love dabbling in this one because it's something that I had, that I'm really close to.
Yeah, I guess a couple of them that I'm excited about. There's one that's called Stream Swap. So that's actually a project that we started like internally, and then we kind of spun it out into a separate team. But that's basically like a launch pad. It's like a new auction system that we designed because I just didn't like the way that the auction systems today seemed a little bit too gameable and didn't feel fair enough to me. And so we kind of designed this new mechanism, and now that's been being used for a lot of the token launches in Cosmos happen via the stream swap auctions. And we actually just had, for the first time, had a NFT being launched via the stream swap. And I think it actually ended up being the biggest stream swap. I think there's over almost like $2.5 million. I think $2.5 million like in that auction right now. So that's like pretty exciting to see it be used for more use cases. There's also like a perps platform on Osmosis called Lavana. but they do this thing they call it well-funded perps. But basically it's like it's like a GMX style thing, but it's actually designed to be much more, in my opinion, safer for LPs because the collateral is still in kind. So, the problem with most perp platforms, you're using USDC as collateral, but here you're able to like if and so that limits their ability to like support a lot of things. You can't create a perp on some shitcoin, right? But because it's just too
Can you
risky for the
describe what a purpose? A lot of audience members aren't going to be, know about these acronyms. Let's kind of give us
yeah,
a
yeah.
basic understanding of when you say perp.
Yeah, so a perp is basically it stands for perpetual future, where it means that in traditional finance, a future is saying, "Hey, I'm trading this in the future. I'll trade you instead of selling you one Bitcoin today, you can buy from me like the one Bitcoin a month from now, right?
At a certain price,
What's the
right? That
point of
kind of
this?
hedges. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the point of this? It's because it allows you to do leverage very easily. So instead of being like, hey, give me like one Bitcoin now, it's like, hey, give me 10 Bitcoin in the future. I'm going to put up this much money as like collateral to buy that 10 Bitcoin from you. Or really what you have to do is you have to buy the difference. So you only have to put up the money. If Bitcoin's at 65K and, you know, I want to buy 10 of them a month from now, I only have to, I think it's going to go to 70K. I only have to put up the money to buy that difference in the value. And so that's kind of, yeah, people love trading on leverage basically. And so perps,
People love trading with money that's not theirs.
yeah. So basically Lavana has built a new design for how to do this sort of leverage trading that is just allows you to trade on leverage with a larger variety of assets because they've reduced the risk to the protocol. The reason why most perps DEXs can't just list like random new coin that just launched is because there's not enough. It's too risky for the platform.
Because the market manipulation is definitely
Yeah.
there, where if it's not enough volume and not enough transactions, whoever is launching this token has the ability to influence it, which we see with a lot of these new tokens. I think
Yeah.
Chainalysis and others have reported like 50% of the new tokens on either Binance Chain or Ethereum are all really easily manipulable, and people have to be very wary of because they're pumping them.
Yeah.
Quick question. I've read up a lot about mesh security, which sounds
Mhm.
very interesting. You're saying basically it's the NATO of maybe the blockchain. Maybe this kind of describe what mesh security is and how you're embedding this in some of the projects you're working.
Yeah. So mesh security, I talked about a little bit earlier about choose what security you want to use, right? And mesh security is sort of the framework that enables that. It allows you to brings, most blockchains today have always been like, oh, you have to have your own security or you have to use like only Ethereum for security. It's like mesh security is like, no, why can't we actually get security from many different places, right? Obviously, you'll use your own token, but you can also get security from other. So, as an example,
Can you build out the concept of what security, like what security are you talking about? Especially because
yeah,
we have a lot of finance people, they think you're talking about securities
yeah,
in
yeah. Yeah.
itself. So it might
So,
be helpful to just kind of like build out the
what
foundation.
security means here is economic security that's staked to protect the network. Basically,
Okay.
what that means is most of these blockchains today are proof of stake based networks. And what that means is we have people have staked, let's say $500 million dollars of assets on Osmosis, and our platform custodies like $300 million dollars right now, let's say. What happens is what keeps this $300 million dollars from being stolen is that if they try to steal that $300 million dollars, the people that are like they're going to lose $500 million. So
Right.
no one would do that, right? That'd be ridiculous. So the idea is, but let's say the assets under management of our system goes up and up and up, right? Let's say it gets to $1 billion. And then our token price only increases to where it gets to $750 million. Okay, we have the assets under management is higher than the economic security that's slashable in case of misbehavior. So how do we solve this? Is let's not only rely on the Osmo token
Right.
for economic security. We can say, hey, if you have Bitcoin, you should be able to stake it on our chain, help provide more security. And why do you do this? Is because you get the cut of the revenue from the chain, right? It's a DEX.
Mm.
This trading fee is being earned. So if you are staking your tokens to help secure the network,
Secure the
you're
network.
getting
Then
you're getting revenue.
you're profiting as well which is almost like game theory, right? Because now you're profiting from the success of the network, which is almost like you're getting paid
Yeah,
double. The strength of the network, you're a part of it, you're getting paid for it. Why
yeah,
would you want to try to do something illicit to it? Because
exactly.
that's where your success lies.
Exactly. And so, yeah, that's why it's like for the Osmo, our Osmosis today, it's only secured by Osmo, but with mesh security, we'll have it be secured by Bitcoin, by ETH, by Atom, by partner project tokens. There's like Lavana, right? Like I mentioned, Lavana is a project built on top of our chain. They have their own token, LVN. Why can't people stake LVN token to secure the chain as well, right? We'll be able to secure Osmosis with more than just Osmo. That's the key
Especially
idea.
people that are already or projects are already in the Cosmos ecosystem, it makes a
Exactly.
lot more sense for them than to like maybe pull Ethereum, right? Would that be
Exactly. Yeah. So I have this like concept where it's okay, you're building, an army to protect your chain, right? The first people, when you build an army, the first thing you do is get that, you staff your army with citizens, right? That's your own token holders. They're the most value aligned with your chain,
right?
right? And so you
Yeah.
give most of the revenue to them. But let's say there's a security deficit, right? Who do you rely on next? Is your allies, right? You say, oh, okay, hey, LVN token holders, you can stake as well. You get some revenues because we're trying to increase our security of the chain. Or, you know,
And that protects
Apsilar.
that would that protect their chain as would that help
Yes.
benefit their chain as
Yes.
yeah, similar allies now to you have more people, more
Yeah.
security, and it protects now more of the
Yeah.
ecosystem. So
And
it's
then
like the
finally,
shared values.
if even with all your allies, you're not at the security threshold you want, then you finally rely on mercenaries. And that's where the Bitcoin and ETH of the world come in. Because, the Bitcoin people who are staking on your chain, the ETH that's staking on your chain, they're mercenary, right? They're just doing it for the revenue. They're not
Right.
that
They could
value
care less
aligned with your
about
Yeah.
whether
Yeah.
osmos or cosmos osmosis or cosmosis makes it.
Yeah.
Let me, as we end this conversation, you joked about, being kind of like a Bitcoin maxi. What are your thoughts about the Bitcoin Spot ETF? Is that getting us further away from obviously your ethos of more people being onboarded in the decentralized nature? Or do you think it's good for the industry that, hey, eventually, if there's enough players in the game, right? If there's enough people at the stadium, you as a decentralized network might be able to sell them more hot dogs versus, hey, there's not that many people. Even if we had the hot dogs, there's not a lot of people to buy them in the first place. What are your thoughts on
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like
that?
I think it brings in more people and like more attention, right? I think people are, I think Bitcoin will replace gold. That's just always been my thesis, and I think that gold, like you need to make it. Gold works as everyone in the world has the ability to like access it, and some people, a lot of it comes from the gold ETF, but also people just buy gold directly. Like if you go to India, like so many people, they take the excess salary and they put it into buy like bricks of gold basically. And so, I think the ETF just increases the options for how people can hold Bitcoin, right? There'll be the people who want to hold it in like self custody, but then, not everyone's going to do that. And I think your analogy with the stadium is just like spot on, right? I think it's like
I just
give
thought of that
more,
now, so I'll
yeah,
make sure to clip it. I'll
give
clip it
more
so you
people
can
access to Bitcoin. That's the goal.
yeah, if they're sitting there, if they're talking about it now, at least so you can introduce it in the conversation. They even understand what the underlying asset is. Whereas before, they probably didn't. They just know it because it comes up on the ticker on CNN
Yeah.
or BNN. Any advice, for anyone that's looking like they listen to this podcast, they're like, hey, I have a concept I would love to try and build on osmosis or, in the Cosmos ecosystem using the tools. What advice do you have for new developers that are looking for a little bit more just similar to you, right? You're looking for a little bit of a different application or to actually create applications. What advice do you have to anyone that's looking to enter your ecosystem?
Yeah, I guess my advice would be learn Rust. Rust is probably like like the main smart contracting environment of Cosmos is in Rust and for Solana as well. So basically, like today, if you're learning, if you want to do smart contracting on EVM, it's Solidity. But I think that's Solidity feels like it's like the thing that's gonna, but I feel it's like very similar to Java, right? For a long time, people thought Java was just like, it won, right? But eventually
Right.
new programming languages come out. And I think most smart contracting systems are going to be moving towards Rust-based things. So, Cosmos, we have this thing called Cosmwasm, Solana, Move. These are all Rust-based. So if you want to have a development skill set that I think is more long term, Rust-based smart contracting is probably what to invest your time in learning.
That's that's really interesting. And any other insights that you have about what you're building Osmosis Labs, like the thrill of the shill right now, as I got from the MFM podcast. What do you want to talk about that you're looking forward to in 2024?
Yeah, I think what I'm looking forward to is, I think the three big focuses are things I kind of touched on throughout our course of our conversation,
Yeah.
but just to recap them is Bitcoin renaissance is happening, right? Bitcoin for a long time was just pet rock, and now, very valuable pet rock, but it's now there's a whole ecosystem of development growing around Bitcoin, and Osmosis intends to be a big part of that. We want to be the DEX for Bitcoin. So that's number one. Number two is account UX, right? Fixing onboarding. Onboarding is really broken today, and
Please.
we have a roadmap of steps that we're taking to do that. And then number three is privacy.
Do you think people really care about privacy? I always think about, we always say we care about
Mhm,
privacy, but we'll give out 10 pieces of personal information
mhm.
to save 10% on Bed Bath and Beyond. So,
I
where do you feel that people really sit on the privacy scale?
so I think actually people do care about privacy, but there's certain things people care about, right? So, for example, for us, you have this all this front running and MEV that happens in
Yeah,
crypto, right? That's a privacy problem. That's because the mempool, the before your transactions make it on chain, anyone can read your transaction. That's a privacy issue. So that's
right.
solving that is number one.
And what front running is that they can now spend more on transaction fees to either
Yeah,
offset whatever you're trying to do or to see, hey, everyone's trying to buy this NFT. It must be very popular. I'll just
yeah,
double the transaction fees. I'll get the
exactly.
NFT, but I know because there's so
Yeah,
much pent up demand that they'll be coming to me when I go to sell them on the secondary market.
yeah.
Is that
If you want to buy an NFT, right? You can someone can see that that's what you're trying to do. They can buy it and then turn around and try to sell it to you. Oh, now
sell it
no,
to
you
you?
pay me more. Pay me 50% more, right? That's not cool. The other one is on-chain privacy for traders. So a lot of traders I know don't trade on decentralized exchanges because everyone can see they're leaking their trading strategies, right? Everyone can see every single trade that someone is making. That, you know, a lot of these companies spend a lot a lot of money developing these proprietary trading strategies that are private. If you go on the stock market or even on centralized exchanges, you can't see which account made which trade, right?
Right.
That's today that's just a no-go. This is
And then you
table
have these
stakes here,
Twitter
right?
sleuths that are able to figure out your whole strategy in a matter of seconds running algorithms.
Exactly.
Awesome. Where's the best place do you like to talk to people? Is it Twitter? Can you stand crypto Twitter? Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you? And we'll share it in the show notes.
Yeah, Twitter, definitely. So my Twitter handle is Sunny A97, and you can follow Osmosis at Osmosis Zone.
I love it. I love it. Sunny, this was such a great conversation. I learned a ton about decentralized exchanges, but more importantly, the ethos of why you're building it. I think people just think decentralized exchanges, we're trying to avoid compliance, but you're a lot more thoughtful as, hey, we're trying to build on top of something that most people should get involved in, which is Bitcoin. And this is the best way that we can think that you can interact with multiple chains
Yep.
without there being that centralized authority that we started from trying to get away from in the first place. So it was great hearing your thought process. And I think that will help more people understand about what decentralized networks are really are about.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on. This is really fun.
Thanks, Sunny.